Good evening, members. It's good to see you this new year. Happy New Year. Happy to be here this evening with you. This is probably not going to be a long meeting, so I'll give you that good news up front. And so let's go ahead and begin the meeting, call the meeting to order here at 6 o'clock. Do we have any public comment? Do we have any members of the public that would like to address the IOC at this time? If so, come to the podium. All right, if not, we will continue going to Section 3, Members' Interests. And I understand Senator Joyner may have something she would like to address administratively.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe that we should be provided with the minutes and the attachments at every meeting as opposed to not having them, because in these busy lives that we lead, we don't always have time to go and get them printed out. And I'd appreciate it if you would do that, Mr. Wong, at future meetings.
Is there any, oh, sorry.
I do believe that the roll should be called.
Yeah, that's not on, that's a good point. That wasn't the roll.
First paragraph of the minutes.
I'll go ahead and do that. If we will start, Mr. Hollenkamp, if you will just say your name so we'll, for the record, know who's around the table for the minutes next time.
Jay Hollenkamp.
Bob Hunter. Dan Aprilli.
Ray Shermonti.
Arthenia Joyner.
Vanetta Kilpatrick.
Sean Shaw.
Johnny Wong, IOC staff support.
Audrey Sullivan Moore.
Manuel Menendez.
Rick Fernandez.
Dustin Lemke.
Dan Rollerson.
Okay, thank you, members. Mr. Wong, is there a problem with printing out the minutes and the agenda and the attachments as Senator Joyner requested?
No, not at all. We can provide hard copies at the meeting. If we were to deliver them to you before the meeting, that might present a little bit of a logistical challenge. But if you're comfortable with just taking a few minutes before the meeting to review the hard copy, that's not going to be a problem at all.
So you can provide hard copies at the meeting when we get here as well?
Yeah.
That's fine? Okay. Is that okay? All right. Any other member interests this time? Okay. Let's move to Section 4, and that's the approval of the November 21st, 2019 minutes. If you will take a look, and I will entertain a motion to approve whenever it is appropriate.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Mr. Chiramonte moves that the minutes be approved. Mr. Aprilli seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, let's move to Section 5, workshop topics. I think Mr. Wong is going to help us go through this portion of the agenda, so take it away.
All right, thanks, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for having me. And Happy New Year to everyone. Johnny Wong, IOC staff support. I'm here to brief you on the results of some analysis that the MPO undertook several years ago to generate transparency and accountability for governments following a successful referendum. So the research findings that I'm going to present to you were conducted by the MPO following the failed referendum in 2010. In 2010, a 1-cent sales tax was on the Hillsborough County ballot, which would have funded transportation improvements like light rail. In that way, the ballot language, or what was actually described on the ballot, fairly similarly replicated what was included in the transportation vision laid out by the MPO. So in the MPO's 2035 long-range transportation plan, there were a number of light rail corridors, I believe 9, that were in that vision. More generally, it was just a broad expansion of transit opportunities across the county. Ultimately, that referendum failed, and the MPO commissioned a study afterward to take steps toward creating a plan that the public supported. The thought behind this being that if the language in the referendum replicates what the MPO's plan had in it, and that referendum failed, then the community doesn't support the MPO's plan. So we wanted to study why the public did not support that and use it to improve planning in the future. That analysis included public opinion research based on focus groups, research into nationwide best practices among communities that have a transportation referendum or have a transportation sales tax, and also to identify ways to reduce project costs and find alternative funding strategies for some of the more expensive projects. The focus group research portion of the study showed that among the participating individuals, those individuals were selected from across the county and broke out into 8 focus groups, roughly organized by area of the county that they're originating from, and also demographic mix. Among those individuals, sales tax and gas tax were the 2 highest preferred funding instruments. In the focus group research, the participants said that they wanted to see improvements spread across the entire county to enhance the entire system, rather than having the improvements focus on specific or limited geographic areas, such as just the city of Tampa. That research also showed that there was a strong perception that Hillsborough County's traffic situation was a product of local government's failure to plan ahead and ensure adequate transportation infrastructure for the county. What we took that to mean is that there was a lack of faith and confidence in government and more generally public agencies across all levels to plan ahead, to fix problems, and just generally to make anything better. The responses clearly showed that inadequate transportation across the county was the top priority for all focus groups, and that they believed that something must be done. But one of the concerns raised by the focus groups was that although they agreed transportation was a top priority to fix, there were concerns about government's accountability and transparency. One of the findings that the research revealed also was that in polling them for their memory of what was on the transportation ballot, many of them misremembered the language on the ballot. And so they weren't entirely sure what they were voting for when the time came to cast their ballot. In a subsequent phase of the research team looked at 23 successful transportation referenda and examined in detail how each of those governments addressed the questions of transparency and accountability to address those concerns, and also the public education / outreach / messaging elements to the sales tax. The complete findings of that research are available in the white paper that I attached in the agenda. It's also on the MPO's website, and I provided a link to all of that for you. But some of the primary talking points coming out of that research is that a citizen oversight committee is absolutely critical. So a committee in charge of monitoring the expenditure of funds or some public trust to review the expenditure must be created. The referendum language should clearly state how agencies will be accountable to taxpayers. Transparency of processes, projects, and progress is needed to gain and maintain public support. Funds should be managed and distributed by the implementing agencies. And an informative, easy-to-navigate website is essential for people to easily find information. So we've collected some examples from case studies around the country to show you what other communities are doing following a successful referendum. This example is taken from Los Angeles, California. Their ballot initiative was colloquially called Measure R. Measure R was associated with a half-cent sales tax across LA County. This particular slide is showing a project tracker that they have on their website. This tracker includes a description of the project. It shows what county it's located in, what city, a funding amount for each project, and a status column showing approximately where they are in the project delivery phase. Measure R also has a dedicated public website. On that website, there is the project tracker. They also include information about the Independent Oversight Committee. It's structured not the same as this committee, but similar. It has 3 retired federal or state judges. We have one of those. We have a number of attorneys or experts in legal affairs on this committee. Measure R has one member appointed by LA County Board of Supervisors, one appointed by the mayor of the city of LA, one appointed by the LA County City Selection Committee. That committee is similar to ours, tasked with reviewing annual audits and basically monitoring expenditures. This case study is from Orange County, California. The colloquial term for their sales tax is Measure M. This is another half-cent sales tax, and Measure M also has a website dedicated. It's pretty user-friendly. You can see that it has enticing colors. This website also has a digital dashboard showing the types of projects that are funded, where they're located, the funding amount, and a more colorful, kind of fun project delivery schedule timeline that's shown on this screen on the bottom. Another example is Seattle's Bridging the Gap website, which has high-quality before and after images of some of the projects that have been delivered using this sales tax. This is something that we don't currently have on our website. Of course, none of the projects have been delivered, but I want to pitch this idea to you for consideration. Some of the best practices resulting from the research regarding education, outreach, and messaging are that our projects should be messaged as successes in the collective. So a lot of these communities that have had successful referenda use language like, we did this. This is what our dollars accomplished. It's also critical to involve the public early, often, and completely in the process, from conception of a project through delivery, to personalize the benefits of the plan to the community, to share and spread communication responsibilities to convey messages from multiple sources so that IOC staff support and the MPO and you all are not the sole arbiters of the messaging, that it's a collective, coordinated effort. And also to clearly communicate the consequences, like that acronym, of not completing projects, or alliteration rather. Examples of successful education and outreach. This slide is an example of Denver, Colorado's Fast Track site. This is more geared toward transit expansion. They advertise that since the tax was approved, they've built 58.5 miles of light rail track, 40 miles of commuter rail track, very concise, by the numbers approach that's easy to understand. And so the public access in this website has a very clear idea of what that money is being used for. They also do a really good job of personalizing the benefits, again, using that we collective language. And this is an example from Pima County, Arizona, but there are also examples from our neighbors in Pinellas County. Signage seems to be a fairly effective means of communicating what the money is being spent on and what improvements are funded with specifically the sales tax dollars. Over the next few slides, I just want to go through some of the projects that we've begun or completed regarding messaging and transparency, and then also present some slides about what we don't have, and then hopefully we can have a little bit of a conversation and get some feedback from you about what you would like to have or what you would like to see improved. So some of the elements that lend themselves toward toward transparency and accountability are: we have an independent oversight committee that is roughly modeled after many successful communities which have good transparency among their sales tax revenues. The second thing that we have is staff support, which reviews project plans for compliance, and we have offered recommendations to you, giving you our take on whether or not the plans are in compliance with governing law. Also from that governing law, ensuring accountability are that plans must be approved by agencies' respective governing boards before they get to you. So that's another layer of accountability. The plans also have to be certified by a professional engineer, and the plans for expenditures are required to conform with specific allocation formula that are outlined in the governing law. An annual audit has to be prepared by an independent auditing firm, and we're going to see the findings of that audit at our April public hearing. There's also a process that you all approved for citizens to submit project proposals. So they're involved at the early conception of a project. We're required to produce an annual report and publish that in a newspaper and circulate it to all libraries within the county. We've also been working on a publicly accessible website with a mapping tool that I'll show you a little bit later, which shows the location and status of all the projects appearing in the surtax plans. We have a document library that we intend to use to retain financial documents as well as past presentations, committee agendas. We also have a calendar on that website showing the agenda, time and place of the meetings. We have individual agency pages set up on the IOC website to provide updates about each individual agency's plan development. We have a Facebook page, and we use that to advertise this meeting. We don't get a ton of comments on it yet, so maybe that's an area where we can improve in. And we have live televised meetings, and we archive all of those on YouTube. So there are a number of ways that the public can gain access and learn about what this committee is doing and what the plans are for the projects. But some of the things that we don't have that maybe we want to focus some attention on building is that our Facebook page is very underutilized. We don't have very many hits on that Facebook page monthly. We have it set up so that the advertisement for the meeting allows the public to pass through comments. That's in case they're not able to attend the meeting in person and give you comment. They're able to provide a comment, and then we'll forward that to you, but we haven't gotten any thus far. So maybe some efforts to highlight or advertise our Facebook page would be helpful. This committee could also consider using other forms of social media, Twitter, for example, whatever others that you might be familiar with, could help build the brand of the IOC. Communication responsibilities are not formally delegated to multiple sources. So for the status of project plans and the certification for compliance, the MPO and staff support kind of took the lead on communicating to the public what was going on through press release, newsletters, and our Facebook page, but maybe there's a way for us to coordinate that with all of the agencies receiving a share of the surtax. There is an opportunity for volunteer speakers to go out and message to the community what the benefits of the project plans are and what the status of the project plans are. We do not have a plan, although there has been discussion for advertising which projects have been paid for with sales tax funds, those billboards. And lastly, last on this slide, we're going to invite a public information specialist from the Planning Commission to talk about logo and building the brand of the IOC and building the brand of the surtax. Some other things that we don't have are a way for the public to receive up-to-date information about the budget. I know that there have been no expenditures thus far, but that is probably something that the public is going to want to know about once those sales tax dollars are released. They're going to want to see the status of the projects and how much sales tax money is being distributed to the governments. We also don't have a method for measuring transparency. How is the public to understand quantitatively whether or not we're doing a good job of getting the message out? So maybe that's something that we should think through. What kind of metrics would assess how good of a job we're doing? We could also invest in a tool to quickly assess the public's opinion on implementation of sales tax funds. So there's no feedback mechanism at this moment to ask the general public how they felt about what was in Hart's, City of Tampa's, Hillsborough County, Plant City, or Temple Terrace's plans. We just have to assume that they were okay with it because those governing boards approved it. But maybe there's a way for us to get in touch in a more intimate way with the public and assess their feelings. From the example that I showed you with Measure M, it would be possible for us to build out a digital dashboard showing how this county is performing with respect to traffic congestion, safety, bike ped performance, and maintenance. The MPO is investing in a tool that aggregates data sets and would allow us to do those types of analytics. And so it's possible for us, once we build the tool out, to bring it to satisfy the IOC's needs. And the last thing that we don't have is high attendance at these meetings from the public. That's a challenge that just about all of our committees face, but I don't know about you all, I would like to see us raise the profile of this committee so that we have people coming regularly and offering their feedback, not in a digital way, but in person. And so these are just some topics for the committee to discuss, and then I'll kind of turn it over to you. What key points and topics should be communicated to the public? The audit results are required, and we will have the clerk and the independent auditing firm present the results of the audit at the April public hearing. We're supposed to summarize those findings in an annual report, but what else about the audit would be useful information for the public to know? What is the specific role of the IOC? Aside from what's in governing law, what role do you all play in getting these transportation projects through to completion? What are some ways that citizens can suggest a project? We have a process and a tool for citizens to submit, but does the public know that that tool exists? How can we raise the profile of that? There are a number of ideas we presented to you for how to convey the status of projects, where they're at, which phase they're at, but what is the preferred method on behalf of this committee? And also, what communication tools should be used to reach out to the public and engage them? Annual report and the summary are required, but is there any other way that we can help build out our website to make it more user-friendly? Are there other social media tools that you would like us to invest some time in? And with that, I'll turn it over to you all.
Thank you, Johnny. Members, do you have any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Just a comment, I think part of the problem is because we're kind of in a limbo position now with the court thing, and we're not doing any of the projects. That's, I think, why we're not getting any reaction from people. I think it's absolutely critical when projects are done, and I think that's why Pinellas County's been so successful with their Penny for Pinellas, is any project that they do, they have a big sign and that you see all the time that says that project was from that sales tax, and it makes a connection in people's minds. Okay, well, this is good, you know. So I think that's a really important part. I know you kind of have that on there. Does the IOC have a separate website, or is it attached to the MPO or the Planning Commission?
It's hosted on the Planning Commission website, but it has its own web address, independentoversight.org. You can access it by going to planhillsborough.org and clicking around, but if you type in independent oversight, it'll take you there directly.
I mean, if you went on the Planning Commission website, though, would you easily become aware of the existence of this organization, or do you have to kind of know about it and then look for it?
That's a good question for the general public to answer, or maybe if any of you have clicked around. I'm very familiar with the Plain Hillsborough website, so I knew exactly where to look for it, but I'm not so certain that.
Well, wouldn't it be good if it was on the first page or something, it listed, you know, like the river board, and that was also listed with that? Again, I think it might be too obscure is why we're not getting reaction. If we just try to stand on our own, we're kind of attached to.
So this is kind of the user experience for those who are trying to access information about the Independent Oversight Committee. Again, planhillsborough.org is the website for the Planning Commission, and the MPO is a part of that. Our staff supports the IOC. If you wanted to access this page, you could also do that by typing in independentoversight.org, and it would take you directly to this landing page. And this is what you're greeted with.
But there's nothing on that first page that talks about this organization like the other four.
No, unless there is a tweet or some other social media post specific to IOC business, that would show up on the homepage of the Planning Commission. Everything else is captured only on the IOC page.
I think you should think about the possibility of maybe making it more upfront, or as soon as they went there, like in that rotation of the organizations, this would be one of them, you know.
Okay.
Mr. Hollenkamp.
Two thoughts. To the extent that we do any sort of marketing, branding, particularly a website, My feeling is that it should be simple as possible. When I go on that website, I get lost really quickly. I'm guessing if I went there on a daily basis, it would be a really helpful, functioning website. As somebody who goes there once every so often, it is an overload. So for me, I would say if there was an IOC website, it would have one line that says, "We protect your tax dollars," and maybe some buttons leading to something else. But communicate what we do and keep it simple. The other thing is I've seen with Pensacola's really done some great things, and one of the things that I like most about what they've done is they have a dashboard. So they picked a few basic benchmarks and they measure those and they update them routinely. And it's something that I think we could potentially adapt that idea for the IOC. Maybe there's a dashboard button you click on, but it goes and it says, you mentioned earlier, we've installed this many miles of bike lanes or something like that. Still something, a few benchmarks, not too many, but something that's easily digestible by the ordinary person. If the purpose of this board is to look after the tax money, I think trying to drill down to focus on that particular thing and do our best to communicate that well and potentially give up some other content that might be useful to some people, I personally would think that'd be more helpful and more user-friendly.
Thanks.
Mr. Rawlerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good presentation. Thank you very much, Johnny. Couple of comments, questions. So I saw up there the role of the IOC. I think we need to be careful about getting mission creep here. I think our role is to approve and to evaluate. That's pretty much it. And so I think we need to be careful about expanding our mission or our role. It's pretty much approve the projects when the information comes in to evaluate how the money was spent, whether it was spent properly. And I think that's where we spend our time. The other thing, why are we branding? I'm not opposed to it. I'm just wondering, is this an attempt to reach the public and make them more aware of who we are and what we're doing so that they have transparency? Is that kind of the idea?
We kind of brainstormed that a logo and a brand might help the public understand which specific projects are being paid for with only surtax dollars as opposed to all the other different revenue streams that could finance a project. If for nothing more than to just call them out and celebrate them. One of the agency liaisons that presented a project plan also suggested that it might be helpful for them to show their governing board and their community members that the IOC certified this project. They've given their stamp of approval, so to speak, and that we affix that logo to their plan once it's done to kind of signalize finality.
Kind of help them keep track.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sullivan Moore.
Again, thank you for the presentation, very thorough. I agree with all the prior comments that were made. My personal opinion is in getting the information out to the community. I think we should initially start working on something big, a big announcement saying that the funds have been released, because that's the question that I'm getting quite often. So I think we should maybe start brainstorming about how we're going to get the word out to the public to get their attention. Now the funds are being released, and we're going to show you how that's being done.
Mr. Hunter.
I think Dan raised a good question about our role. But there are 4 governments and HART that are the implementing agencies, and I assume they have a public relations budget of some sort. It seems to me that they should want to fund it also, or fund the effort. I do know that staff has brought to us a major problem nationally, that when these referendums are approved, and they've shown us some good ones, the public wants to know, and there have been some very good marketing tools here, where the public knows and can espouse to anybody where their sales tax has gone on these. Others, the public says, I don't know what's happening to this. And it raises a question, about advertising money or marketing money, but when I look at all the examples shown to me, I'm not the expert there. There's a marketing or advertising experts, and I hate to, because I say somebody should bring the ideas to someone on how to expose to the public what's being done on an ongoing basis. I don't know if it's us. But the word does need to get out there so the public next year starts seeing what's getting done, along with a sign on every construction project that Ray mentioned. But somewhere the logo and all this, because this is going to go on for the next 20 or 30 years, and if they don't see it and don't hear about it, they're going to start grumbling about it too. So I'm not so sure it's us, but it's some entity needs to take charge and run with it. Whether we put together an RFP and we hire a consultant to help us decide what should be done, or the MPO does it, or what. But I think now's the time to start looking at that. I appreciate you bringing it to us.
Mr. Rawlson.
My last one, I promise.
Go ahead, man.
Well, I was just thinking that this is a rather big issue with the public in Hillsborough County, and I wonder, what is the press's role in this? It would seem to me that they would want to, and they would be willing to write from time to time a front page article on, hey, this is your money, folks, and this is where it's going, and this is what's going on. And that, to me, would be the best exposure for what we're doing, and it's a lot of money to them. So I would think that the press should somehow be, engaged in this, and we should consult with them as well as to what they're willing to do.
Yeah, we can do that. We have press contacts that we communicate with regularly. There was some coverage for this committee's first meeting, and after you all certified the project plans in November, Tampa Bay Business Journal did a story. I think one other journal circulation paper did a story. Things have kind of stagnated a little bit because, again, we're in a holding pattern, but we can definitely make an effort to reach out to them more frequently and provide them with updates.
I mean, I think I like Mr. Hunter's idea of maybe having an RFP for a media strategy, and at the same time, maybe seeing if the planning commission or whoever that entity is can help us with that too. With regard to public involvement in these meetings, if I was in the public, I wouldn't come to these. I mean, I don't think we've had a meeting that's the public is going to be comfortable because they can't do anything. Now, this April 27th meeting, I am extremely interested in knowing how we're going to advertise that, when we're going to start advertising it, exactly what that meeting is going to look like. That is a super important meeting that you need to make sure the public is aware of, and that's not just Facebook, and it's not just internet. I mean, we got to go to neighborhood association meetings, and you have to do some of that hard work. And I mean, we talked about this. I'm willing to be one of these volunteer speakers and go to places and talk about it if that gets public interest. But this is the meeting where this room ought to be packed with the public giving proposals. And we need to make sure we have a plan, at least in my opinion, to do that. And that this room is packed on that April 27th meeting, because that's where the public can come and talk about their projects and address this commission. That's the important meeting in my estimation. What is the status of the website? And I like that graph that shows projects and where and how much and all that. What does it take to do that? Is that money, and who does it, and all that good stuff?
The specific design in the examples that I showed you is a little bit different than what we've created thus far, but that's not to say that we couldn't switch gears or pivot and provide this info in another way. So this is a mapping tool that was just rolled off the press earlier this morning. This is mapping information that all of the agencies have provided to us. Of course, it's not going to load when it needs to, but we've aggregated all the information into one mapping tool. You can go on and click by jurisdiction to see which projects are going to be coming online in your neighborhood or in your city. If you're in unincorporated county, you can sort down by what type of project it is. Hillsborough County, for example, they have...
Is it a graph?
No, it's a map. It pops up, not quite as nice as Google Earth, but sufficient quality just to see what's going on. And we envision that once these projects get going, that'll be another source of information for the public. So if they click on any project that's on this map, they'll be able to see how much money is allocated to it, what the status is, and possibly some other information.
Sure. Ms. Kilpatrick and then Mr. Purley.
Sure. So I have a comment, I guess about there was a study, and it seemed as though there was a lack of public trust, and the conclusions that came from that was that there needed to be more accountability and better messaging. I guess my comment about that is that, when it comes to public trust, of course, standing up an IOC is very important to, give the public some assurance that there's a body that's overseeing, because obviously the public is, they're very busy. They elect representatives to take action on their best interests. So that's kind of like something you delegate to your elected officials and all that. But what I have a concern about is jumping to the conclusion that it's about accountability and messaging. I think there's something that's lacking is that public trust the lack of public trust may result from, people seeing a lack of interconnectivity between the different government agencies, right? So we've got one organization that's approves development and new houses, and then you got other agencies that are dealing with schools. All of those things affect transportation, traffic, and there doesn't appear to be any interconnectivity between them. So, when you have an objective of improving the overall traffic in the area, but then you've got these different parts of the government that seem to be not working off of the same page, I don't see anything being done to address that as far as having these types of objectives should be, shared equally across different parts of the government that have a role in transportation. And one of the things that comes to mind for me is there was a conversation over the last couple of meetings about complete streets. So if complete streets is an objective, we should, in my neighborhood, believe it or not, was presented in one of the meetings is, there's going to be a project to provide complete streets to a part of my neighborhood. My neighborhood is not that old, so I'm thinking if that's an objective, that should have been incorporated into the original design. There's no way my neighborhood, where I live, should be on this list for complete streets. Why wasn't that part of the original design? And there are probably a lot of people who feel that way about their neighborhoods because the county is continually expanding. So we're expanding, and then all we're doing is making more projects that need IOC attention, that need to be included in that, 1% sales tax, where if all of these different government agencies were marching in, to the, in the same direction, it should be taken care of as a routine matter, as opposed to requiring some special funding for things that we know are objectives of the transportation initiatives. I don't know if I made that clear.
Yeah, you raise a good point about, the first thing that I noticed was, I think you're speaking to some of the constraints that may be facing the IOC. You all are representatives from across the county, and some of those governments may have different interests in building up their constituents' neighborhoods in a different way that doesn't necessarily match with other parts of the county. I don't know if we have the power to change that necessarily, but providing information about the decision-making processes might help the public understand why one neighborhood is developing in a slightly different way from another. Is that kind of where you were going with?
No. Where I'm going is when we have county, and I'm talking, Hillsborough County, if we have ordinances or we have our county commissioners making decisions about these different issues, whether it's schools, I personally witnessed a child getting hit on his way to school a couple weeks ago on a bike. He was crossing the street. So, things like that, it just seems to me that when someone is approving a development, if these objectives have not been included in their plan, it shouldn't be approved. So I'd like to see the county do something to change its own approval processes across the various committees and the various boards, so that it's not, all these transportation discussions should not happen in isolation.
No, I agree. This is just one of those times where I say, that ain't us, and we got a limited spot. But I agree with you. I think the public is frustrated by the lack of government coordination. But we got a small kind of window of what we're in charge of and what we can do, and I think we're just trying to bring more public awareness of what the little that we are doing. But there is, one of the components of this presentation you gave, which I think is a good idea, is share the communication responsibilities to convey the message. And if you had all the implementing agencies doing a presentation and one person from all the implementing agencies, a 4 or 5 person presentation, if we're doing these presentations, I think that would be useful. Someone from all these implementing agencies getting before, I could see your neighborhood association or something like that and coming and talking about how this works in conjunction. I think that could be useful. But in terms of, the other stuff you're talking about, I agree, but if we could do that, we'd be in really good shape. Mr. Aprilli, then Ms. Sullivan Moore, then Mr. Chiaramonte.
Well, just a comment. I think we assume that everybody is able to get on the website and look it all up. But there's a lot of older people who don't use the website. So we're going to have to reach out to the media, the newspapers, the TV, for these to get the message out. I mean, you see this on Channel 9 News all the time. There's an intersection that's a problem, and they're trying to address it. Somebody's complaining about it. There's been so many accidents. Well, I think that would be a perfect place for us to say, here, we're going to fix this intersection with your tax dollars. And you'll get the message out that way a lot quicker than hoping that somebody's looking on your website and maybe find it and maybe not find it on your website.
To respond to that, the IOC is not allowed to advocate for certain projects. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but I think maybe the role that the IOC could play is to communicate to individuals within that community who are suffering from some transportation problem that there is a process for them to submit their ideas for projects. Maybe we can work to put them in touch with the government that can take that project and mature it if they choose to move forward with it. So that's definitely a role that IOC and the staff can play in that specific.
But you can also shed light on a project that has already been approved that would improve that intersection that he's talking about, right? Okay, I just want to, okay. Ms. Sullivan Moore.
So when we were looking at the various methods for communication, it triggered a memory that I had with the school district. They put out a video, half-cent promise or half-penny promise. So I'm thinking a video would be a good idea, and whereas everyone might not have access to a computer, everybody's got a cell phone. So a video, I think, would be a good idea to spread the message. And what I would suggest before spending money on an RFP is maybe talking with Hillsborough County, because I know as a parent, the communication that they've put out, I haven't had to look for. It's been presented to me. So I think we can get some pointers, because they have the same oversight committee. I think we can get some pointers from them before pursuing the RFP route.
It's a great idea to create a working group among the public information specialists at each agency and see if we can coordinate a unified message. And I overlooked the comment that Mr. April made. We're very well aware of the digital divide. You know, that's something that we're cognizant of anytime we go out and try to do public engagement about our projects. And so I think a good opportunity would be to attend those neighborhood association meetings if we have volunteers to go out and advocate for, not advocate, but to speak to what the sales tax can do, what projects the sales tax can fund, and you know, brief the neighborhood on projects that are in the queue that maybe they don't know about.
Mr. Tremonte.
I just wanted to give a little context and remind us where we were and how we got here, because I think things are a lot better than we think about when we have to go back to 2010 and think of what you mentioned, what the people said. The product of that, and Bob Hunter will remember this, this whole thing started in 2006 when Mayor Iorio came to the Planning Commission and said, we have to do something about transportation here. And this whole discussion of doing an MPO plan that included mass transit was done. So this is 2006. Remember what we were all doing then? We were living high. Traffic's going up because the economy was booming and all that. So that's the plan that was started. Then the recession started gaining strength. Remember, this was in, think of 2010, our unemployment rate in Hillsborough County was 12%. It's like 3% now. We're like in a different universe. And people were reacting to that. Their distrust of government and all that was all part of high unemployment, all kinds of other problems going on. The other thing was it was a wake-up call for a lot of people. When we were going to do the focus groups, I will tell you, a lot of the politicians absolutely did not want to do that. They didn't really want to know why people voted for it or against it. They never wanted to talk about it again. But luckily, we had leadership on the MPO at the time that said, no, we need to know, because, and a lot of the elected officials, I remember, told us at the time, well, you need to talk to our constituents. And my answer was, I talk to them every day. What about the rest of the people that never come to the county center for a meeting? If we don't know what they think, we're never going to be able to move forward. So that we got this private sector focus group. They didn't even know why they were coming. They didn't know they were going to come and talk about transportation. They were just regular voters. And I sat through every one of those meetings except one. And what shocked us was the level of disconnect they had as far as how transportation is even planned. On the referendum, you made a comment, I think, about that. Not knowing what it was. I remember this one guy said, we were voting on a high-speed rail system to go to Disney World that was going to take 4 hours to get there, and it was going to stop in every city in Central Florida. This is what he believed that he was voting on. And we're like thinking, oh my God, we have to have a whole educational process, because the public out there really is clueless, and that got confused with the whole high-speed rail thing, you know, in I-4, and they thought they were voting for that. So it was a whole different way, and the whole thing about government agencies working together. I think over the last 10 years, we've made tremendous strides, obviously. And when they were going to do this referendum, they went back and dug up that study. Again, the citizens group that did this, to look at what the people said and to try to address that, because there was that mistrust. That's why I believe this committee was created, because the people felt like there had to be someone else watching the elected officials to make sure they did what they were supposed to do. That's how we came about. So, you know, we're in a different world now. We've got growth, the economy's doing well, and people are talking to each other more. We just got to, as you said, to continue to do a better job. But we're in a lot better place than we were a decade ago, and I really hadn't thought about that till you showed that, and I thought what was going on then, and yeah, we were in a bad place, and we're not there now. So now this is a chance, a once-in-a-generation chance to move forward and not create mistrust, and do a good job with what we're doing, and make sure that government does what it says it's going to do, which I think is why we exist. So,
Mr. Hunter.
Couple of thoughts. As I see the map up there, every one of the 4 governments require an engineer to submit their engineering according to that local government specs. We can, the IOC, require a local government, when it submits their projects, to submit them to our specs? We can. All we have to do is identify it. And it can be to the quality of Google Earth, if we want to. That's an option to where we assimilate them, or somebody does, and we have the quality of Google Earth where a citizen can find a project almost down to the sidewalk level. One thought. I didn't get on the IOC to work out a marketing plan. But I'm going to throw this out to ask the staff, or for the committee's consideration, to ask the staff to bring us back some options, probably within a month to 6 weeks, for us to consider. I don't think we're the marketing people, but I know what they're faced with, because every successful transportation tax, they have expended some funds to do this. Seattle has done this, Portland has done this, LA has done this. And when the people have the confidence and are familiar with how it's being done, everybody, majority of people are happy when they know what's happening. And right now, I see us struggling with, well, do we do Twitter, or what type of map do we do, or, should the 4 governments do it and leave it to them, and we just sit back and look at the projects? May I suggest that we ask the staff to bring back some options that we might consider at some time before the April meeting? Just a thought.
Sure, I was actually going to make a very similar suggestion. I don't think we need a motion for that. I do think we would ask staff, staff's talking to lawyers, so you got to give them time to do that. That's more important than Twitter right now, but
That's over there.
I think it is important for us to ask staff to come back with suggestions for us. And I think a component of that suggestion should be an RFP. It doesn't cost money to ask for proposals. So I would want an RFP just so we would know what is out there. But I would ask staff to come back and give us some parameters as to what this might look like in terms of an outreach plan. Yes, Ms. Kilpatrick.
So I have a question about that. What would be the objective? Like, if you're going to submit issue an RFP, what exactly are we going to ask those proposals to include? Just a marketing plan, or I guess to what end?
How to foster transparency and accountability, how to get the public involved, how to make sure that our mission is more known in the community, how to make sure that people trust that their taxpayers' dollars are being spent well. I would think. Yes, Mr. Rawlings.
I think what Vanette is saying is what's the scope? What's the scope? When we're asking for a request for a proposal, we got to give them some scope of engagement so that they have some idea of what we're trying to do. Kind of define it a little bit and say, well, maybe within this dollar range, or here's what we're trying to accomplish. What can we do for what cost, that sort of thing. But I think, I agree, I think defining the scope a little bit to help them would be advisable.
We have some staff that deal specifically with the tools that I showed you, the mapping tool. We have public information specialists, community coordinators, outreach specialists. And one of the suggestions made at the table earlier was for us to coordinate those special staff into a working group and see what we could come up with. If the committee is okay with that, maybe we could try to coordinate a couple meetings, draw up some drafts, bring them back to you at a later time, and if they kind of meet your expectations, maybe we can move forward with those before we do an RFP, because that would require some additional issues to work through, I think, jumping straight to an RFP.
I'm fine with that.
It's got to include options.
I'm fine with that if the committee's fine with that.
Yep.
Okay.
I have another question.
Yes.
So as far as staff funding for something like this, is there budget to hire marketing, agencies, or to fund some of these ideas? And where would that money come from?
Those are two good questions. I don't have the answer to either at the moment. Sorry.
So
I thought that there was administrative money available for exactly that sort of expenditure. Is that not correct?
So Beth Alden, MPO Director, and if the sales tax funds are released, then we could use some of those funds to support the Oversight Committee in providing public information about the agency project plans and so forth. I'm not speaking loud enough. So in the meantime, we are basically providing in-house support. Now, we do have, as Johnny mentioned, graphic designer, PR person, website designer, so we can pull some things together. You are required to produce an annual report. We will make sure the annual report gets produced with our in-house resources if we are not able to use the sales tax dollars at this point. So, and I think that's probably the next topic on your agenda, what
I
goes
think
into that.
Representative Rawlinson might have a question of you.
Yeah, wasn't there a 2% earmark for administrative?
It's 1% for planning
Some
and,
money designated for administrative and such, right?
it's for planning and development. So it would support things like technical analysis. So for example, Johnny mentioned the dashboard to track performance metrics, performance of the transportation system. We have gone ahead and fronted some of that investment using some of our planning grants. We'll be able to build it out a lot more fully if and when we have access to the sales tax dollars, but we're doing what we can with what we have right now.
Thank you for doing that.
Yes, Mr. Germonte.
What is the status of the court ruling at this point in time? Has that changed? Is there a date when we know the money?
I don't think there's a date we know. I could ask counsel if he wants to tell us what the status of the,
Because we shouldn't get too far down the road until we know that.
what's the status of the lawsuit to the extent?
On whether the tax is legal, I guess.
Yeah, at this juncture, I think everybody knows the two cases are on appeal at the Florida Supreme Court. Oral argument, is scheduled for, I believe it's Wednesday, February 5th at 9 a.m.
Does that mean they're likely?
Sam Hamilton County Attorney's Office.
They're likely to decide it that day, or?
No,
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
that'd be too easy.
Okay.
Law doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and I don't even want to speak to a time frame other than it won't be that day.
Thank you. Mr. Hunter, did you have a?
Don't local governments and hearts have some funds available to contribute to this effort also?
I mean, I don't know. This is probably
Sure they-
why you ought to have a joint meeting with everybody to
Yeah,
talk.
it's gotta be yes.
Projects, so they
I mean,
should.
They do have marketing money. I know they do. They've got to have it.
I don't want to answer for the
Okay.
jurisdictions.
All
I
right.
think
Well,
the first step would probably be reaching out to them, asking him if they'd like to have a preliminary meeting to see if we can game plan for providing some public information tools and concepts to you all. If any of them opt out because of limited budget, that's just another issue that we'd have to work through, but.
Look at their projects
we'll
next
cross
year.
that river when we get to it.
I'll strike that comment. So are you comfortable with kind of what the committee's asked you to do and come back with and have the joint meeting and get us something? I think that time frame's probably right, a month or 6 weeks or something like that. You comfortable with that?
We'll see what we can accomplish in 6
Are you comfortable with what we asked
Yes,
for, though?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Anything else, committee members, on this topic? All right.
Right,
Thank you,
all.
Johnny.
That means another meeting.
We'll get there.
Good evening. My name is Caroline Charles. I'm Community Relations Coordinator for the Planning Commission. I'm going to go over the proposed content for the annual report. Before I begin, I do have.
I'm sorry, where are you in the agenda right now? Okay, thank you, sorry.
So before we begin, I have the draft content for you and then also some samples of some other reports that other cities have done as well for you guys to look at.
You going to read all those?
These are all mine.
Just to read it.
So we'll go through that all in a minute. But first, as you all know, your committee is required to prepare an annual report for the public. However, because the surtax funds have not been used yet, the report is going to be abbreviated, with the majority focusing on the overview of the sales tax, the role and responsibilities of the IOC, and also the transportation issues that are planning to be solved as well. Of course, the main purpose is to be transparent with the public and clearly present to them what is being done with their money. So in the packets, the first one in there is the draft of the content for the annual report. And we're trying to keep this pretty short. It'll be no more than 12 pages, so it is not going to be a lengthy document at all. The report will be presented to you at the public hearing in April. And then after it's finalized, we will publish an insert in the local newspaper, online, and then also distribute it to our county libraries for public review as well. So going through the content now of the annual report, this is the general outline. So of course, we'll have a cover page. Inside that, we'll have a message from the chair. After that, mission and purpose. I know you guys mentioned you don't really have much of a mission, but we do need to describe the overall role of the IOC. After that, we'll do a summarization of the audit findings, which will show the money that has been distributed to the agencies. After that, we'll have what the surtax can fund, showing the revenue allocation to the different agencies. After that, the general purpose portion. And then following that, the uses of the surtax transit restricted portion. After the funding section, we're going to move into the surtax project plans. It's going to have a short summary of all of the projects, and then a description for each one as well. And that will probably be only about a page for that. After that, we'll have a map of the locations and projects. And then following that, we'll have the names of each of you all, the committee members, and then finally the back cover. So before we get into this content, we also wanted to just show you a few examples of some from other cities. So we have, the next one in your packet is the LA Metro. So their annual report was quite lengthy, but we did find this 4-page fact sheet, which was really helpful and laid out very well, what they did, their process, and they had, very clear purpose and goals, a map of the rapid transit and highway improvement projects, and a list of all the projects and a short description. So this would give you a good idea of how the content and the design would work together. And Johnny also already went over their website briefly, so I won't go over this again. The second one in there was from Phoenix, Arizona. This was a very lengthy document as well, so this is just a short snippet. It wasn't as user-friendly, but we wanted to show you guys this one for content purposes. It mainly focuses on the overview of tax receipts that are higher or lower than the previous years and their estimates, and then also goes into updates on each separate life cycle program, the freeways and highways, arterial streets, and transit, of course, with project progress and expenses within those. So going back to the content slide, we wanted to open it up to discussion to see if you guys were all comfortable with the draft we had come up with and if you wanted to add anything to it.
Any comments from the, yes, Ms. Sullivan Moore?
The graphic on the first page where it says county municipalities, can that be divided up to show what they are? Does it add up to?
Sure.
54%?
Yeah, we can divide that.
Right, I think
Yeah.
that would be helpful, because I would be looking for things that impact my community. So if I was Plant City, I would want to see Plant City up front.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Hall.
In terms of usability, I think it would be nice with some of these categories, some of the buckets, if there was an easy way, and I don't know that there is, to communicate, like, this would be an example of what would fit in this category. So for instance, we could say, Temple Terrace has proposed this change, and this was approved in the prior year, and this is the sort of project that would fit under this category. I think that would be nice.
Okay, have an example project.
Yes.
An example project, but also put it in layman's terms, because when I look at maintenance and vulnerability reduction, that really doesn't mean anything to me. So you can give an
Absolutely.
example of a project, but like put it in layman's terms, what that actually means.
Of course, yeah, completely agree. This is just a very rough outline. We will make sure that it's very accessible to the public, for sure.
You might give like more than just one example, though, you and then such as.
Any other comments? Yes, Ms. Kilpatrick.
So I would expect to see a summary chart, kind of like what Ms. Sullivan Moore mentioned with each jurisdiction, but also broken down into the categories, almost like just a table that shows each jurisdiction, how much in each category, and a total. I see this one that kind of, what is this, page 6? But this appears to be just heart, and I think what we would want to see is like a summary of all of the jurisdictions, rather than just one.
Yeah, we can make that happen.
A summary, not the full list. is what
Yeah,
we-
no, I understand. We used Hart and Temple Terrace just as samples, one for an agency that has specific formula and one that doesn't. This is a very preliminary draft still, and Carolyn and I pretty much worked on it just this weekend. So there are a lot of improvements to be
Gasparillo's
made.
this weekend.
Yeah, we just wanted to give you guys something to go off of, to start the
No, this
conversation.
is a very good
Yeah.
product. Thank you. Any other comments? All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much. Great project.
And I know we talked briefly about marketing.
Briefly.
Yes, briefly. They did want me to briefly go over this. We're going to focus mainly on logos, however, so we're not going to get into too much of it. But I know you guys all know the very basics of branding, but just to reiterate, it is more than logos and colors. It's definitely your overall image and reputation, something we already discussed earlier. And that goes double for government agencies. A brand is more about the public's experience, building trust, credibility, and managing and strengthening how the public sees you as well. So effective branding, in short, ensures the public has a much easier time understanding you, identifying with you, and trusting you with their taxpayer dollars. So with that in mind, additional branding details like a logo can be necessary to further build your credibility and professionalism. Your logo is really just part of your brand. It's the flag of your organization. So we did want to go over briefly the process of developing a logo. I know it's not going to be you guys developing it, but you guys do need to kind of come up with, different themes and concepts for the designer, whoever will come up with it.
Can I want to ask a question because Representative Rawlinson asked it, and I want to make sure you get a chance to answer it if it's any different from what Johnny said. Why do we brand?
Yeah, it's to create professionalism. It's so that people can recognize you as the IOC. They need to know, what you guys are doing with their taxpayer dollars and stuff, and they need to know about the body that is, doing it, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
So briefly, logo creation. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but this is one good way to start. So define your mission, position, and values. And that's very broad, I know, what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. But having that conversation will then help you find the meaning of identifying those key concepts and key words, and kind of cluster them into themes that will express your organization's message. So coming up with symbols or icons that can be used to define them. Different types of logos as well. Just want to go over that briefly. So there are word mark or letter marks where it's written out, or initials. There is a pictorial logo where it's just like a symbol, so think like Facebook or Twitter or Apple. Obviously, that's probably not going to be the best for the IOC. There's abstract, which is a type of pictorial logo, and it's a geometric form, and you can create something entirely unique. We'll look at a few on the next slide. After that, there's an emblem logo, which is a font inside of a symbol or icon. Those are badges and seals, and a lot of government agencies use those as well. And then there's a combination of the above. So really, it can be, anything you guys want. But ultimately, you do want to think about how your logo is going to perform in different areas. So does it scale up and scale down well? Can you put it on a banner, an email, a flyer, a letterhead, and have it look professional still? Finally, once you have, maybe you're down to 1 or 2 logos that a designer has given you, go back to the beginning. Does the logo support your mission and message? Is it distinctive? Will it work across different media? And will it stand the test of time? So with that, we'll look at a couple of government logos. First, on the top left corner is the Congressional Budget Office logo. I really liked this one a lot. It's no fuss, clean, it's a little retro, but it does have a timeless look to it. You've got the C, the B, and the O all together in letter mark form. Next to that, you have the United States Postal Service, which is a combination. You've got the forward motion of the American eagle, of course, very distinctly American. After that, you have the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's a combination abstract and emblem. You've got the waves, the sky, ocean, and the bird kind of combined into one abstract picture. Next to that, you have the Federal Trade Commission, which is an emblem. Obviously, this is very official and very detailed. After that, the bottom left corner there, the United States Environmental Protection Agency. That's a combination abstract and emblem, and encompasses, obviously, the whole natural environment. You've got the growth of the flower with the sun, the land, and the water all together. With the IRS logo, obviously, this one's much more serious. It's a combination abstract and letter mark. But it's very well balanced. They've got the eagle representing the U.S. Scales of justice to conduct, their operations fairly, and the olive branch as well. And then finally, we have the Plan Hillsborough logo. This depicts our 3 boards and our purpose as well. We've got land use, transportation, and the Hillsborough River. So just in conclusion, there's really no right or wrong way to come up with a logo, but we did want to open up to the committee to have a discussion about the different, major themes and concepts you guys wanted for your logo, and then you'll have a better idea of what you can take back, to a designer to create one. So if we have time now, if you guys want to start going over some different themes and concepts.
I will open it up to the committee if you would tell me what type of
I had all kinds of
inside, outside, color, what's going on here?
Don't think so much about, I know I showed you, don't think so much about what it's actually going to look like. Just start defining more about who you guys are and what you are to the public, and the designer will do all the other work.
Okay.
I just got this image in my mind of like a nun with laser beams
Oh, God.
staring at the elected officials or something. But it made me think.
That's one suggestion.
Yeah.
You would never be forgotten. Independence and oversight,
Okay.
something that kind of reflects that, not in such a negative way, though.
Ms. Kilpatrick.
Well, you provided some different logos, but as part of Hillsborough County, which is what chartered our organization, I think there should be some connection perhaps to the county's logo or some other, like the MPO logo, something, because we're connected to those entities.
And yet independent.
What's that?
And yet independent. It's in the name.
Any
Right,
other?
but you're providing oversight to Hillsborough County. I mean, I
Right.
think that's, can't be left out.
Yes, Mr. Lewis.
What jumps into my mind is something about approval. I don't know, I keep thinking like a stamp of approval or, IOC, approved by the IOC with a check mark or something like that. So I was thinking stamps or check marks, I don't know.
That'd be some of the options they bring back to us. That's going to be the stamp for 30 years, so it's got to be important.
Yeah.
I'd like to associate it with the 1 cent. with the penny.
1 cent, okay.
These are good suggestions.
I think the eagle shows a sign of, oversight and trust.
Okay.
Big eyes.
No, we're not doing the
Not
big
the
laser eyes.
though.
You're right.
Any other suggestions? Those are great.
A cyclops.
Just one eye.
You could have an eye, and then the pupil, and then the IOC. I mean, I know I sound like I'm on drugs,
We'll,
but,
we'll save that one.
just kind of oversight, So do something with that. Yeah.
Good luck. You got that?
I got
Cyclops
it.
with
I'll
the
come back
IOC
with
in
a
it?
Cyclops logo for you.
You asked for this, right?
Good thing I'm not in marketing.
Well,
None of us are. No, you got, I think those are some good ideas. We gave you
Okay.
some word
Yeah.
association and
Yeah.
pennies and
you
eagles
guys
and,
think of anything else, feel free to let Johnny know and we can try and incorporate it into the logo.
no, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad we have people like you to prevent us from having a cyclops with a laser coming out of it. Thank you, appreciate that. Where are we at now?
Just about that.
Oh, we aren't there, okay. We are at old new business, so the public hearing meeting is April 27th, 2020, with a town hall style presentation of citizens project proposals. I'm very interested in fleshing out what exactly that means. And so what I'm proposing is we're gonna probably need to have a meeting in March sometime to deal with some of this marketing stuff. And so what I'll have staff do is reach out and try to get a date that works for the majority of the board. And at that March meeting, we can talk about some of the marketing stuff that comes back to us, and we can also flesh out exactly what that April 27th meeting might look like. Is that an okay plan? Can we do that? Okay. That was easy. I appreciate that. All right. Do we have any comments from any members or anything before we adjourn?
I appreciate staff's initiative in
Yes.
getting us into this. It's needed.
No, that particularly with us with no marketing expertise.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you doing that. And on Gasparilla weekend,
Yeah.
you get extra credit for that. Thank you. Okay, members, with that, we will adjourn the meeting 7:17. Thank you.